There are a number of techniques to becoming a good screen printer, especially if you use manual screen printing equipment, and knowing how to use a squeegee properly is foremost among them. In this section, we will discuss various printing techniques and related subjects. If you are like most t-shirt screen printers, you will most likely start off in the business using a manual press. Using a manual screen printing press means literally doing the work by hand. One drawback of manual printing is that using a squeegee is a repetitive task. With what is known today about carpal tunnel syndrome with regard to repetitive tasks, we recommend the use of wrist supports. Wrist supports, when worn properly, help protect against carpal tunnel syndrome without affecting the range of motion that is used when pulling a squeegee. Wrist supports are available online from a company called HarborFreight.com and elsewhere. Now let's get into how to hold a squeegee properly. While holding the squeegee properly should be intuitive, a few steps may still be in order, especially for those who have never used one. It's our experience the best way to hold a full-size squeegee, 10-inch to 16-inch sizes, is to place your hands approximately 1 inch from each end of the squeegee. Holding the squeegee this way allows for a good balance for most print applications. When using smaller squeegees, such as those that you will use to print a left chest size print, you will not have that option, and your hands will have to be, of course, very close together. With smaller size squeegees, place your hands in the most natural or comfortable way possible. To avoid premature hand fatigue with any squeegee, avoid gripping the squeegee with a death grip. Only use as much gripping power as is necessary when printing. Gripping too tightly will become painfully obvious on long print runs, and the best way to avoid that is to be mindful of your grip and loosen up when necessary when you're printing. Now let's talk about squeegee angles. The angle you hold the squeegee during the stroking process is important. Remember this rule: the more you angle the squeegee downward, assuming equal pressure in each stroke, the more ink that will be deposited on the substrate, and the darker and more opaque the print will become. As a manual screen printer, you want to become a master at how to use a squeegee. We're going to cover the main types of stroking techniques for manual screen printing right now. The normal stroke, for you math-oriented folks, an angle of 45 to 60 degrees can be considered a standard angle to hold the squeegee for most print jobs. A little trick that was shown to me a long time ago was to draw an imaginary line from your nose to the squeegee handle to simulate the 45-degree angle. Keeping this line pictured in your mind while printing will give you a point of reference for angling your squeegee properly. Let's talk about a flood stroke. A flood stroke is used to coat the print area with ink prior to doing an actual print stroke. This is often necessary so an adequate layer of ink can be laid down, and you need to flood the screen to accomplish that. A flood stroke is considerably more downward than a normal stroke and has an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. Now we're going to talk about a printing stroke that's not often discussed. It's called a coating stroke. This may in fact have been a term that we coined in our own shop, which is also around 20 to 30 degrees of like that of a flood stroke. The difference is that of a coating stroke, it's applied with lighter pressure than a flood stroke. The coating stroke's purpose is just to cover over a first or second stroke to achieve an acceptably opaque print on a dark shirt without having to flash. The mastery of an effective coating stroke takes some practice, and keep in mind it will not work with all inks in every type of mesh count or artwork. Next thing we want to discuss is how hard should I pull the squeegee? The rule of thumb is don't push down so hard as to cause the squeegee blade to bend. It does not take a huge amount of force to drive the ink through the stencil. Use as little force as is necessary. This will take some practice because it's intuitive to pull hard, but it's well worth mastering, not only to produce good prints, but to reduce operator fatigue as well when putting long jobs. The next thing often asked is, how fast should I stroke? If you can't pick up all of the ink at the end of the stroke, you're printing too fast. Printing too slow is usually not a problem. Printing too fast typically is. Just remember the first rule. If you can't pick up the ink, you're printing too fast. That's the only one that may cause you problems. Now here's a very important part about squeegee use is how many strokes should I use? The short answer is as few as possible. Ideally, use only one stroke, but in the real world that usually is not possible, particularly in the world of manual printing. If you're flash printing dark shirts, one stroke is impossible, nor is it possible for certain print jobs where flood stroking is necessary and where one stroke just doesn't produce an acceptable print. The rule to live by is dictated by the words above. Use as few print strokes as will produce an acceptable print. What is an acceptable print? A print that is one that you are reasonably certain will not give the customer any reason to complain. Now let's talk about another item that's not mentioned often either, is what we call ink return. An important detail that I've never seen mentioned in any screen printing training materials is the technique of returning the ink after the end of each print stroke to the back of the screen. The purpose of this is so you'll have a good ink supply when you'll print each following stroke. We coined a term for this, called it an ink curtsy. And all it simply is pick up the ink at the end of the print stroke and return it to the starting end of the screen, drop the squeegee and angle it down to drop all the ink just in front of the squeegee. Once you've mastered this technique, you will discover how useful it is. Next time we want to discuss is test printing. Always have on hand an adequate supply of test print squares to set up each print job. And make a test print of every job you do and keep it in storage for future reference. Test squares, also known as Pallon squares, are available at most screen printing supply vendors. Test prints serve many purposes: to ensure the screen has been exposed and washed out properly, to make sure there are no pinholes and other defects in the screen, to check the actual ink color on a print after it's cured, and to test your dryer to make sure that the ink is actually curing when you send it through the dryer. Test squares are also sometimes useful for settling disputes with customers. Occasionally a customer may complain that there is something wrong with the order they received. A common complaint is, that's not the ink color that I ordered. By keeping a test print on file of every job you print, you can always go back to check it for reference to see if the problem is real or imagined by the customer. Without a test print, it's their word against yours. A 10-cent test print may remedy a problem on a $1,000 or more order. Get in the habit of writing the customer's name, the date, and the print specifications such as the ink, mesh counts, print order, etc., about how the order was printed, and write it on the test print. This type of record keeping will come into use when you need to figure out how a certain job was printed when you've forgotten the details about it months or even years later.